You can retire on Social Security. Chapter 13, What Savings Crisis? After reading the research of Bernicki and the pushback from the industry, there's a link in here in case you're listening to us on the podcast to an article by Jonathan Clements. I began to wonder, what if we're wrong? What if we've been running retirement planning models incorrectly all these years? How would that change things? The naysayers of Bernicki were not convincing. Their argument was simple. The reason spending goes down is because people run out of money. But they didn't provide any evidence of that, just speculation. Are retirees actually running out of money as they age? Where's the evidence? Then I came across this book from Larry Kotlikoff and Scott Burns, Spend Till the End. The premise is based on consumption smoothing, similar to what Bernicki stated when he wrote, as I emphasized before. Many of our younger retirees had problems spending within the income parameters of their retirement plans, while the majority of our older retirees were spending far less than they could afford. What Bernicki is stating here is that younger folks spend more than their traditional retirement plan models allow for, while older folks spend less, much less. Yet the traditional model assumes there's a level spending pattern, the same 4% adjusted each and every year for inflation. But that level spending pattern is as likely to occur as you get in a 7% rate of return on your investments each and every year with no variability. It's not going to happen like that. Think about it like this. I'm 49 years old with a family of 6. We have a large home and a large mortgage. We also have 4 sets of braces to pay for and multiple sets of glasses. It costs $850 for my second to play high school lacrosse and another $1,000 to play soccer. My youngest 2 play sports for at least $300 a pop. We have multiple broken bones, health insurance expenses. The costs go on and on. Never mind that every time we go on vacation, we need 2 rooms in a hotel plus the cost to feed a family of 6. You get it. Fast forward 10 years though, when I'm 59 and my youngest at that point will be 22. My oldest 29. Presumably we'll be empty nesters. Days of paying for braces? Gone. Sports for kids? Gone. The need for a large house, large mortgage? Gone! Can't wait for that. Feeding 6 people 3 times a day? Gone. Expenses will drop significantly. Yet, traditional retirement planning models would ask what our income is and then say we'll need 80% of that income in retirement. They'll also say that in retirement we'll need to increase our income each year with the rate of inflation. When you think about it, that traditional retirement planning model just doesn't make any sense. When I look at retirement planning through the prism of Bernicki, Kotlikoff, and Burns, and my own anecdotal evidence of over 20 years of experience being a financial planner, I realize it's all been wrong. I'll never forget a client I had back around 2010 or so. He was in his mid-80s, lived in the D.C. area his whole life, and was a huge Redskins fan. Back in the old days, when the Redskins played at RFK Stadium, seats were impossible to get. In fact, people would pass them down in their will so the seats would remain in the family. This began to change once Daniel Snyder moved the team to Maryland and increased the cost of season ticket ownership with PSL, private seat licenses, an outrageous cost to park and such. Of course, a losing team doesn't help either. One fall day, we were chatting, and I asked him if he was going to the game on Sunday as an NFC East rival was coming to town. He said, "Nah, I gave up my season tickets this year." Now, season tickets had been in his family since the 1950s, so I was stunned by this revelation. Are you boycotting Snyder, I asked? A lot of Redskins fans were very disillusioned with Dan Snyder's ownership of the team. There's no other reason for this guy not to buy season tickets. He could easily afford them. No, I'm just getting too old to enjoy the games, going to the games anymore. It's easier and more comfortable just to watch from home. And then it hit me. Bernicki was right. As people age, they don't spend like they used to. Not because they're running out of money, but because they just slow down, which means we've been greatly overestimating the spending retirees will have in the latter part of their retirement. And as such, we've been encouraging them to spend far less than they may want in their earlier years of retirement. Even worse, though, is we've been telling workers that they're not ready and basically never will be for retirement. We've been saying there's a retirement crisis, that they need millions to retire, they aren't saving enough, etc. It's doomsday predictions all over the place, yet it's simply not true. I wrote a blog post about this in May 2019 titled "Time to Tune Out the Financial Industry," which you might find of interest. In fact, go to your favorite search engine and type "Americans aren't saving enough," and you'll find story after story just like this. from CNBC. Most Americans aren't saving enough to retire by 65. And they'll even put visuals in the story like this. What percentage of annual income do you save? How much Americans set aside for retirements, emergencies, and other goals? None. 21% of Americans don't save anything. 20% save 5 or less, 5% or less. 28% save 6 to 10% or 6 to 10%. 10% save 11 to 15%, and 16% save over 15%. In fact, the St. Louis Federal Reserve Board puts out a survey about the personal savings rates for Americans, and they show the average American is saving just over 6%, which is significantly lower than what it used to be in previous decades. It's not I guess you can get that. It's not quite as crisp as I'd like, but anyway, what this chart, I'm showing this chart, this personal savings rate going back to 1960 with the St. Louis Fed. Right now it's about right about 6%, right almost like 6.2% is what they said in April 2019. It's probably averaged to about 1990, about 10% from 60 to 1990 or so, maybe a 10.5, gone down, but still hasn't not anywhere near where it was in the previous 3 decades from 1960 to 1990. Thus, it's an emergency, no? What is odd about this argument of savings crisis is that while they chastise us for not saving more and they long for the days when everyone had a pension, they inexplicably overlook the actual taxes we pay into Social Security. Back then, Social Security taxes were significantly less than we pay now. Below is a table directly from the Social Security Administration, which shows the taxes employees and employers have been paying into the Social Security since inception. HI, by the way, is hospital insurance, i.e. Medicare Part A. While those taxes have no effect on your retirement income benefit, they certainly are obligations you don't have available to do other things with. And what you'll see the tax rates from 1937 to basically 1956 being less than 2%, 1956 to 1961 being less than 3%, 1961, 60 to 1970 being 4%, and that's for you, and then your employer pays that as well. 1970 to 1980 being less than 5, 1980 to 1990 being less than 6, and now where we're at now, 6.2% on each side. But then, don't forget, before 1965, there was no Medicare HI. So it's just 3. So in 1965, you paid 3.625% in taxes for FICA, for Social Security. You didn't pay anything for Medicare Part A. Again, that's HI. The employer also paid 3.625. All right. So now we fast forward to 1989. You pay 6.2% for Social Security, OASDI, and you pay 1.45 for HI. So your total tax burden is 7.65, which is more than double what it was 55 years ago when we had a higher savings rate. What should be clear as day is that we are paying over twice in taxes now as what we did back in the 1960s when our personal savings rate was over 10%. Could there be a correlation there? Higher taxes, lower savings rate? In June 2001, 3 economists, one of which is one of my favorites, again, Larry Kotlikoff, did a study on how 401k participation actually increases taxes and reduces consumption for middle and lower income workers. But while that finding was huge for me in terms of opening my eyes to the insanity of deferring taxes for as long as possible, they also wrote, and I quote, "People are contributing so heavily to Social Security and receiving sufficiently large benefits from that program that they have little need and wherewithal to do additional saving. This picture, writ large, goes a long way in explaining Americans' low rate of personal savings." Unquote. Interesting, no? And remember, this was written in June of 2001, yet the fallacy of this low personal savings rate remains to this very day. Why is that, you may wonder? Could it be the investment industry trying to scare you into investing more so they can make larger fees, could it? It's actually weird how many economists and others are flummoxed by our decrease in savings rate. Andrew Biggs, one of the preeminent scholars on all things Social Security and was previously a deputy commissioner at the Social Security Administration, writes, "The logic is straightforward. When taxes go up, people work less. When Social Security benefits go up, people save less." In fact, the disincentive of high marginal tax rates has turned many on the left to actually oppose left-wing policies on taxes. Just read Ronald Reagan's biography, or even Astrid Lindgren, author of Pippi Longstocking. And I quote, in 1976, Lindgren learned that because of tax laws requiring her to pay both income tax and employer's fees, she would effectively be taxed at a rate of 102%. Though she was generally a supporter of the principles of socialism, paying more than she actually earned appalled her. And so she published a satirical fairy tale, Pomperipossa in Monomania, about a children's book author forced to pay exorbitant taxes. It really should come as no shock that the more we pay in tax, the less we save. Let's just look at the taxes we paid to Social Security in 1965. It was 3.625%. Factor in total employer contributions, and the total tax was 7.25%. Our personal savings rate averaged around 11% back then. So between our Social Security taxes and our own personal savings rate, we were squirreling away about 18.25% a year. Fast forward till today, when our personal savings rates average 6.2% and our total Social Security taxes are 12.4%. Well, looky here, we are saving 18.6% now, which is more than we were saving in the 1960s. Somehow, though, there is a crisis. Weird. And don't forget, we're not including the HI, the hospital insurance, the FICA part, the Medicare part of it, in the tax either. But Josh, more people had pensions back then. Well, more people had access to pensions, that's correct. But the majority of private sector workers never had access to pensions, even in the heyday of the 1960s. And even the workers with access, how many stayed at their jobs long enough to benefit from a pension? I don't know. But tell me, would you rather be the guy who is owned by his company and goes there every day for 30 years to manufacture widgets in order to potentially have the benefit of a pension, or someone today without a pension with a much more vibrant economy and freedom to engage in whatever it is you want to do? Personally, I'll take the latter. In fact, it's because we're of the latter I'm able to even write this book and get it into your hands. Wouldn't have happened in the old days. So let's wrap this chapter up, shall we? What's the likelihood your spending actually increases with retirement? According to government research, not likely at all. In fact, your spending will probably decline, and substantially at that. I'd be remiss if I didn't offer why I think this is the case, actually. People spend less from principal than they do from income. It's called mental accounting. It's a very interesting phenomenon, not rational in the least. But that's the wonder of human beings. We are not rational creatures. Here is an interesting piece from the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, which talks about this very scenario. All right, so chapter 14, stay tuned. We got 2 chapters left. This is a good one, especially in this political era. Medical bankruptcy is killing the American middle class. Really? Smash.